All right, let's do it. This is the one. I've been putting it off because it's never fun. But today is Richard. Will you help me make sense of the midterms? I'm going to help you make sense of the midterms, but only from my already warped perspective of the midterms. But I've noticed that it was pretty embarrassing in the build up to the midterms. There was a lot of political YouTubers, a lot of political streamers that just retreated immediately into their camps. If you were the blue sports ball political team, democracy was on the ballot. Democracy was on the ballot. This literally was. There was even a headline I saw. I can't remember which publication it was. I could probably Google it and get it for you. But it was literally, these are the most important elections ever, for real this time. After they told you that in 2020, after they told you that in 2016, for real this time. And it will be, of course, for real bussing this time in 2024 as well. But equally, what was cringe was a lot of the Republican leaning, YouTubers and people like Tim Pool, for example, who I don't really think is Republican leaning, but I think just loads the DNC so much that he's happy to throw his lot in with the Republicans. All of these people were talking about red waves. I mean, somewhat embarrassingly, I do believe Tim Pool did a video saying that it was an omen that there was a blood red full moon on election day, and I'm like, fucking witchcraft now? Like, that's political analysis? Like, are you fucking serious? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe I am getting too old for this shit. But anyway, it was embarrassing. I really like Razorfist as a polemicist, but he also had an embarrassing video that he delisted where it was like, get ready for the red tsunami. He even went one further as to say it would be more than a red wave. And basically, what I'm gonna tell you is, if you get your information from these streamers, like, just try and broaden your diet, because these people exist in really weird bubbles where they lack the perspective and the nuance to even be able to tell you what's actually going on. And so, as you can see from previous streams and things I said, there was never going to be a red wave. There was never going to be a red wave. And I will happily outline and explain why as part of this stream. But just to put it broadly, the DNC strategy was quite exploitative and cynical, but that doesn't make it any less smart. And what they did was they essentially put Trump on the ballot again, because you can't, if you're the Democrats and you fucking, brought the economy to its knees, gas prices are through the roof, you got people, you went from, unemployment, which you blame on the pandemic, to then job creation, but people don't want to go back to work because of the types of job it's creating and the types of benefits and stuff they've been able to get during that time. You've got essentials in, groceries and food, like things like baby formula. You've had that in crisis and supply lines not coming through. You've tried to blame all of this on Putin after you shifted from the pandemic blame. Not to mention just generally things that have been poor optically, like bowing down to the teachers' unions and insisting on we must mask kids, push vaccinations on children, which is increasingly, not being done in Europe. And that's just because teachers are like, oh, we want to stay at home and we don't want to risk our health. And it's like, okay, but isn't it about the kids or what? All of these things. I mean, pretty much the Democrats did everything they could do to get fucked in the midterms. And usually, you lose like 4 Senate seats or whatever. That's just standard. But this was what they call a pocketbook election, if you're not familiar with that term. It's basically where people go to the ballots in America to vote for something that supports their financial interests. And obviously, right now, any American will tell you the economy is shit. It's not helping out the average American. 401ks are disappearing. And we haven't even got to the recession yet, which is coming, obviously. Prepare yourself. So a lot of people did expect there would be nominal gains for Republicans if they went to the ballot with things as they were. But what Biden did, and I'm going to do a separate video on this just to show you how it was constructed, he went on a tour that essentially put Trump on the ballot. And what I mean by that is they kept talking about there's all these Trump-endorsed candidates. Trump's probably going to run again in 2024. Do you want MAGA in the White House? Do you want MAGA to be making the decisions for America? And then it went from being MAGA Republicans to mega MAGA Republicans. He started talking about mega MAGA. He wanted to make a distinction because you got criticism for pushing back against what's a MAGA Republican? Are you against all Republicans? And he went, no. It's mega MAGA Republicans that are the problem. The people that take MAGA, whatever that is, by the way, that's just an ephemeral nonsense. It's an acronym created from Make America Great Again, which, as I've told you many times, Trump was not the first president or indeed candidate to utter that slogan. You can go and find, Clinton said it, Reagan said it, let's make America great again, But anyway, now it's bad. And so you've got mega MAGA now. And what they mean by mega MAGA, I imagine, are the Trump acolytes, which we'll talk about a few of them in very critical terms, mostly because they lost their races or just squeaked across the finish line, because generally the Trump acolytes are uniquely vile, terrible candidates that nobody should vote for and have no place in politics. They couldn't be politicians anywhere but America. So then he went from mega MAGA, right, to just before the midterms, a new term squeaked in, ultra MAGA. This is absolutely true. And as I said, I will do a separate video on it to bring it all home for you. Ultra MAGA. So, we didn't get Giga MAGA, which is a shame, but we did get Ultra MAGA. And Ultra MAGA obviously was like what they were pushing just before the midterms, because it was like, listen, these people are racist. These people are Trumpians. These people don't support gay marriage. They don't even support interracial marriage. If you allow these people to win their races, bad things are going to happen to America. You must get down. You must vote. A couple of other things. By putting Trump on the ballot, I think we saw in 2020 that obviously, even a neutral voter can no longer put their chips in with Trump. Nobody wants to vote for Trump. Nobody wants Trump in the White House. It doesn't even matter. You can be the hysterical, shrieking, orange man bad reply guy, right? You can be like that. But equally as well, whether you have a problem with Trump on sort of an individual basis, whether you think he's an asshole, whether you hate his policies, it doesn't matter, because if you're a neutral person who simply doesn't have a dog in the fight, you just want things to go back to normal, and you are sick of hearing about Trump. And we've had 6 years now. And so by putting Trump on the ballot, obviously the neutral vote is going to be, well, I just don't want to go through that again. I don't want Trump's candidates. I don't want Trump everywhere. I don't want people, putting Trumpian policies into play. So the neutral vote are almost certainly, as we saw in the Pennsylvania race with Fetterman, which we'll talk about, are going to lean more towards the blue side, just because, any Trump-endorsed candidate actually didn't do too great in this election, and he's no longer the kingmaker in the party. The other aspect that you need to consider is the Republicans acted against their own interests because they're Republicans, right? So they put things on the ballot which were just always going to energize the base. When you look at the statistics as to what happened, there was a huge spike in young voters in this midterm election. Once again, it was the energized youth vote that dragged the rotting husk of a corrupt political party that is the DNC across the line. And by the way, the reward is, it now turns out courts are not going to uphold Biden's student debt relief package, but more on that later. But anyway, particularly young women. And why would young women go out and vote? Well, of course, because what happened with Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court, you put abortion on the ballot. It's unbelievable. Again, I don't really understand why it's a hot button topic in America. I think it's like that Office meme where it's like they look at a fucking unformed fetus and they look at a fucking 3-year-old child and they go, corporate has asked you to identify the difference. And they're like, that's the same picture. I don't know why, because, generally the rest of the world has like fixed it and just moved on. Like, it's just not. It's like, think about a British election. Abortion just never comes up over here. It's just, women have the right to do it within these parameters, and there you go. On we move with life. But in America, it's a ballot issue. I won't get into the wheres and the whys. But anyway, by putting that on the ballot, obviously, you energize young women. Why would young women want to go and vote on that issue? Oh, yeah, because they want bodily autonomy, right? So it makes total sense that they go down to the ballot and they can't vote for Republicans because, as we saw, once Roe v. Wade was removed by the Supreme Court, which, again, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs, but probably needed to happen back in the Obama era and something else be brought while Obama had House, Senate, and Ginsburg in the Supreme Court to give them a majority in every aspect of the necessary power to get something else in its place, because it was constitutionally unsound in the purest sense of the Constitution. But anyway, they put it on the ballot and it cost them. It cost them big time, and it was stupid strategy. Just looking at it in purely cynical, cold, clinical terms, bad strategy. So everything that happened in the build-up to this was pretty much expected for me. I expected Republicans to narrowly take the House. I expected them to actually lose seats in the Senate, especially Herschel Walker, man alive. It's hard to believe it's real, but again, it's American politics, so nothing should surprise you. And incredibly, that's going to a runoff election. So, yeah, look, before we start talking in sort of nuts and bolts and cutting through the media coverage and showing you some of these races, I'll just also give you my incredibly biased thoughts about the American political system, just so you know where I'm at, and then you can determine whether or not I'm worth listening to after I explain them. So I believe Americans are presented with a choice every time they vote. They choose between a blue criminal party, right? A blue criminal organization and a red criminal organization. And these two organizations are criminal organizations with very few nominal differences. There's some window dressing. One criminal organization professes to care about racial issues and gay rights. The other criminal organization says, listen, we're going to enforce Judeo-Christian ideals and a return to tradition and conserve values that make our country great while, creating, strong borders. And then the other criminal organization goes, immigration's good, actually, and we need it. And so This creates this illusion that these are two drastically different entities, which of course they're not. It's often referred to in geopolitical terms by some thinkers as the monoparty. Essentially, yes, there's a divide, but it's two halves of the same thing. Now, what happens is in these elections, you are given a choice and you vote with your conscience. You vote on the issues. And so you put in power a political party that is really a criminal organization. While that criminal organization is in power, they do everything they can to cling to power for as long as they can. And all that time, they enrich their donors. Right? They enrich themselves. They reward all the corporate interests that they ultimately serve. And they try and do it in a way, and the media, of course, and they try and do it in a way that will not piss you off too much. But you will get pissed off because you will notice it. And they do it for as long as they can, and they might get through a midterm election, and then a general election, and then another midterm election, another general election, and they will sustain power for as long as they can, all the while suppressing information, all the while trying to bribe people, internationally with rewards, just to don't talk about us as being a criminal organization, don't do that. But eventually you will snap. And you will say, I've had enough of this criminal organization. And so, presented with the illusion of choice, the majority of you will go out and vote for the other criminal organization. And as the criminal organization leaves that big white house full of criminals, they high-five each other and go, it's your turn now, good job, go get 'em, Tiger. And then when that criminal organization is in power, your life doesn't really change except in a few nominal areas, and they do the same thing. And they enrich themselves, and they enrich their cronies, and they enrich corporate interests, and they get away with as much they can until it's time to put the other criminals back in power. That is American democracy. It is a banana republic on steroids. It has been for about 70 years, maybe less. Those are my thoughts on it based on just observably true things. You have to ask yourself, if it wasn't that way, why does foreign policy never drastically change? Why has America always been fucking with the Middle East since the discovery of oil in the Mesopotamian region? Why, they've in the 100 years since it was discovered, I think America's been kind of interfering with it for about 95. So why does that happen? Why do corporations continue to have all these benefits, but you don't? Why do you work more hours no matter who you vote for? Why do you have less and less rights no matter who you vote for? Why does your money go, less and less further no matter who you vote for? Why do you have pay rises below the rate of inflation while Jeff Bezos gets away with paying virtually no taxes because they refuse to change the tax code no matter which party's in power? It is a shell game. It's bullshit. It's all bullshit. Right? So once you realize that, you can decide how important these things are. Personally, I think it's a sham. It's up to you. Anyway, let's do it. Let's start with just giving you a broad overview. This is the Guardian's midterm election map. I was watching this on the day, foolishly expecting an American election to be decided within, 48 hours of the ballots getting in. No, they don't have the technology for that. But you can basically see the overviews here. You can see that the Republicans obviously managed to take the House. They could win a few more seats there. There's like still 6, I think it is, races outstanding. You can have a look at these maps here. Some of these are pretty much decided, like you can see up here in Maine. It's 98.8% reported with 4 points for the Democrat candidate. Some of these, I think, have even been declared. We'll talk a little bit about Colorado, the Lauren Boebert case, a uniquely awful candidate who looked like for a long period as the votes were coming in that she might lose. Instead, she's narrowly held on to the seat. Adam Frisch has conceded. It doesn't even look like it's going to go to a recount, which seems strange to me. I would have backed on it to do that, but that hasn't been called because there's only 99% in. And on it goes. One of the things that is very interesting is, and I talked about this again on a previous stream, when I was out in New York, I was bumping into a lot of people who were very blue, but can't believe what's happened to the city, what happened economically. And this is anecdotal Andy bullshit, but they were all saying probably, midterms, you're going to see some people pushing back. And it was interesting. There was 5 seats, I believe, in New York that had flipped essentially red. You see some of them around here. And basically those were all, those were all blue back last time they had their elections, and they strongly blue, by 5 points in some cases. So the gains in New York definitely helped the Republicans gain control of the House, although again we're still waiting on the final number to see how much it is, currently at a gain of 8. So the other thing, and I'm not going to focus on any of the governor races, we've had this bullshit down in Arizona again. You can see that a lot of people thought Carrie Lake was going to win. She's been one of those, again, Trumpian, attack the media, blah, blah kind of candidates. And a lot of people thought that was going to maybe energize Arizona. Arizona's a shit show when it comes to counting votes. There's been a lot of things that are being framed as irregularities down there. They still haven't fully counted the votes, even though the race has been called. There was some ballot issues where some of the machines weren't working and stuff. And again, you never know whether Republicans are over exaggerating, Democrats obfuscating some stuff, because there was some weird things that happened in the Senate race at Pennsylvania with the Fetterman campaign, which we'll get to in a second. But overall, this was historic for a president in the midterms, if you can believe it, because as I said, even Obama, Saint Obama, even he lost, Senate seats after having, Senate and the House control after his first, going into his first term. And so for Biden to actually hold onto the Senate and actually gain is pretty ridiculous. These were the key Senate battles. These were the toss-ups. And see, this was actually a surprise to me as well. Ohio, yes, it went red, but this is, they always do. And J.D. Vance is another Trumpian candidate. J.D. Vance is another one of those, really god-awful grifters. And yet he wasn't able, he should be winning by 10 points in Ohio. He should be winning by 10 points and didn't. And that was considered pretty embarrassing that he didn't cream Tim Ryan, which should tell you a little bit about which way the wind's blowing on this and why you put Trump on the ballot in the first place. These were the toss-ups, which again, when they use the term toss-up politically, it means it's going to be a close race. You can probably see which way it was going to go. But, on any given day, it could have gone another way. Wisconsin went red. That was to be expected, but again, pretty tight, only by a point. Pennsylvania was the one that truly surprised me. You may remember in the last stream, we did some American politics stuff. I talked about Pennsylvania and how I felt Fetterman was done. For those that aren't aware, Fetterman was the candidate that had a stroke right at the start of his campaign, and a very debilitating stroke. He's a big guy, obviously been unhealthy for a long period of time. And John Fetterman, and I'll show you in the part of this video called the body horror of the Fetterman campaign, he had essentially tried to hide how debilitated he was by his stroke. We know that he was cognitively impaired. We know his speech centers are broken. He needs a machine to essentially process information. He can read it, but not audibly process it. And also to help him reply, again, he needs to read the information to say it. He refused to release his medical records despite multiple requests. And again, I'm always of the opinion candidates should, at request, release both tax records and medical records if you are going to serve the people in the highest office in the land. I don't care what party you're from. If there is a reason to request those things, i.e. allegations of financial corruption, allegations of being impaired and not fit for duty, then you should be forthcoming with those records, and the government should be able to mandate that you're forthcoming with those records, or you have to drop out the race. Anyway, there was a debate, which I'll show you clips from, and it was horrendous. He opened it up by saying, "Good night, everybody." Not a joke. You'll see for yourself. And after that, all the reports, all the polling data was saying there was a huge swing towards Dr. Oz. Now, Dr. Oz, by the way, is another absolutely awful Trumpian endorsed candidate who should have lost his medical license. He's a snake oil salesman. He was peddling fake fucked up diets and all this and doing it via a daytime TV show, ultimately pitching them to some of the most vulnerable people in our society. You know, we're talking about if you're at home during the daytime, you're probably elderly, you may be unemployed, you may be disabled. And so think about the target audience of that and how fucking vile and wrong it is to be pitching things to people in those demographics. So Dr. Oz, not a good candidate, but bada bing, bada boom. You can see 5 points to Fetterman despite him not being able to talk. And that blew me out of the water. I really thought Pennsylvania was going to go red, especially with his flip-flopping on fracking being in play there. But Pennsylvania does traditionally go blue. And obviously, he had a D next to his name, and the fact that he's incapable of speaking or, and maybe thinking, we don't even know, because we have no idea the damage the stroke did because he won't release his medical records. He's in. So we'll focus on that race in a little bit. Nevada, again, a close race. Adam Laxalt was another candidate that I believe Trump endorsed him, but Mitch McConnell wasn't so keen in pumping money into that race. I'll show you an interesting statistic in a moment. And less than a point, Catherine Cortez Masto was able to get over the line there. Arizona, Blake Masters, I mean, I don't need to say too much about that guy. Also a Trump-endorsed candidate, by the way, blown out of the water by Mark Kelly. And this is the horrifying one. This is the one that I can't listen. I'm not saying Raphael Warnock is a great dude. Okay, for those that don't know, Raphael Warnock, the Democrat in this race, was accused of domestic violence, was accused of running over his wife's foot with his car during a domestic incident. When the police were asked by journalists about it, the police essentially covered it up and said, "Oh, there was no indication. We couldn't see any indication her foot was injured." And right? He incredibly is just a better option than Herschel Walker, because that's one of those things. I don't like it. But generally, he hasn't been engaged on the childish nitpicking. And he's let Herschel Walker, as you'll see, essentially tank himself. Herschel Walker was relying on the fact that, he's known from sports. He had the Trump endorsement. He is very good with the church folk. He talks a good game. But actually, when it comes to practice, as you'll see, this guy's full of shit and possibly has CTE and says crazy things all the time, including, as you saw in the video called The Unfettered Cringe of American Politics, pretending he was a secret FBI agent on stage, and also delivering a monologue about how one time he had voices in his head telling him to kill somebody who cut him off in traffic. And then he prayed to God and God stopped him doing it. So, the fact that this goes to a runoff is crazy to me. I really thought Warnock, just so you know, in Georgia, you got to get over that 50% or it goes to a runoff election. And the Libertarian Party was there, getting their little 2% of the vote, the Lolbertarians, who, by the way, listen, I'd probably vote Libertarian if I was voting in America right now. Like, just fuck the other two. So, the Libertarians sort of, there was 2% of the vote that could have gone either way. One of the funny things that was happening, and stop me if you've heard this one before, if you follow these things, all the Republicans were going, once again, the Libertarian Party has stole the Republican vote and cost us a seat. And it's like, guys, why would the Libertarians ever vote for you? If you're truly Libertarian, what the Republican Party's preaching with things like, I don't know, just for example, the abortion laws, that's counter to what Libertarians believe. Libertarians don't want government interfering with that. They don't want regulation of drugs and regulation of your body. They don't want fucking government representatives interfering with medical decisions. So why would Libertarians think, you know what, out of the two parties, I really like the Republicans? It just wouldn't happen like that. Every election, though, the Republicans always mauled about the Libertarians. It's so fucking stupid and childish. But that's the breakdown of all the toss-up races. Everything else went the way it was going to go, and it was kind of incredible. It shows how low the bar for Democrats were coming into this. They celebrated these results like you would have thought they had swept the board, That's what it's like, because they know they were in a, dire straits. There is a world where if the Republicans had been a bit more canny and had fucking pushed Trump out on the iceberg, go away, Donald. It was fun. We loved the memes. We loved your tweets. We had a great time. But now you cannot be anywhere near us. You're too toxic. If the GOP had done that, and the Supreme Court hadn't have done what it did with Roe v. Wade, you're looking at probably a very different state of affairs. You could be looking at probably almost, maybe you're looking at House and Senate control. There's another aspect to this, and that is that, candidate quality absolutely matters. And because of Trump and because of the GOP wanting to see if there was any juice left in this populist wave that they were riding back in 2016, they thought, let's just see. And they picked some uniquely awful candidates. Remember, by the way, Donald Trump, when he selected Dr. Oz, he said Dr. Oz will do incredibly well with women in the 35 to 50 bracket. Those people, over that demographic, overwhelmingly voted for Fetterman. So you can go look at the polling data. Trump ain't got it, because Trump literally thought, they sit at home and watch him on TV, they'll vote for him. He's a fucking idiot. Some interesting factoids. Not factoids, I've got to stop saying factoids. The word factoid has become synonymous with a little small interesting fact, but it, as I've been corrected multiple times, a factoid is a lie that is repeated so often that people say it's true. So there you go. I am learning and evolving too. Here's this little thing I wanted to show you. It should sort of indicate where we're at in the political landscape now and how things have shifted quite a little bit. A lot of people think the Republican Party is the party of big money. That always used to be the case. They were always the ones that had the heavy hitter donors. They weren't too, how shall we say, discerning about where they got the money from. They would often, when they got elected, serve corporate interests, and so they got that when they had huge war chests when it came to battling away. That hasn't been the case for a while now, and it, sort of in the post-Trump landscape, the Republicans, the GOP, they pick their battles where they want to put the money, and it really does show, and it shows in some of these results. Mitch McConnell took a lot of flack from pro-Trump GOP members and pro-Trump political commentators, pro-Republican political commentators, because they didn't put the money into some key battles, which they then subsequently lost. And unfortunately, the other aspect of it with American politics is generally the more you spend, the better you do. You know, those TV ads, those PACs, those, flyers everywhere, the fucking, signs in the yard, the billboards, it all adds up, but it all costs money. And you can see in Arizona, Blake Masters just wasn't backed at all by the GOP, Kelly spent $73 million, right? And yeah, he creamed them, but 73 to a $9 million spend, I mean, that's insanity. Nevada, Cortez Masto, $46 million against Laxalt, 12 spent on their campaign. You can see here, this one not as important in the race, but New Hampshire, 36 million to 2 million for Baldock. Pennsylvania, Fetterman spent 52 mil. Oz had a pretty good raise there. A lot of people really felt Fetterman was there for the taking. I thought he was there for the taking. Probably the one thing I was wrong about. I absolutely thought Pennsylvania was going to go red. A 37 million spend, and then Warnock spending 75 million to Herschel Walker. Again, a reasonably sizable spend by Republican standards, 32 million. And so the big money party has been the DNC in these midterms, and just in general, they're the ones that put lots of money into these races. Now, look, I haven't had time. And I saw some of you already in the chat typing it. I haven't had time to really break down and get to grips with the FTX story. You know, the FTX story kind of goes everywhere. It's not just, I mean, it's even in esports, for fuck's sake. But essentially, what you need to know about FTX was, you know, this crypto exchange, you know, the guy, you know, is suddenly a billionaire. He's suddenly sitting down at the White House. He's literally he was the second highest donor behind George Soros in terms of giving money to Democrat causes while living in the Bahamas. It's insane, actually, this story. Not to mention going to the White House to meet a Biden aide to talk about Ukraine. Then Ukraine partnered with FTX at a time while they're being invaded by Russia, and it's like a crypto for aid drive. It looks terrible. A lot of people in the media are saying this is like the most obvious money laundering operation you could possibly have. But I don't know. I'm gonna have to obviously look into it. And there are so many parts and so many components to it. But all you need to know essentially where FTX plays into this is, you know, many of these races, many of these PACs, political activist committee, many of these got money from FTX, so that's in there as well. Anyway, just to also underline what I was saying about New York being a bloodbath, these were the numbers here, and you can see if Democrats lose the House, which seems increasingly likely, this was obviously on as the election results were coming in. New York may be a big reason why. The New York 3rd District, 4th District, 17th District, 19th District, and 25th District, Republicans appear heavily favored. All 5 voted for Biden in 2020 by 5 to 15 points and were considered highly competitive. So, I mean, you know, there has been this, I don't want to call it a sea change because, like, New York's never going to be red, right? Like, that's never going to happen. But equally as well, I think New York has had some significant problems that New Yorkers are like looking for change. You know, obviously the crime in New York's getting back out of control. It'll never be the levels it was when I was growing up in the 80s, where it was like you would have only heard about New York if it wasn't for Detroit. You know, it was really fucking bad. And then, you know, obviously infrastructure in New York is fucked up. You know, you go online and you just see like videos and it's like, man, exploderized by a gas main, or just a manhole cover just blows up, or, you know, just electrics just go out. Power cuts in New York, and homelessness, drug problems, fentanyl overdoses. Like, New York's had a real resurgence in social problems, and there's also been some demographic movement. I can't recall the area, but there was one area that's had a lot of traditionally Hasidic Jews kind of move in, and that's kind of changed the voting demographic, because obviously the Republican relationship with Israel and just general Judeo-Christian values, obviously a lot of Hasidic Jews do vote Republican, so that's been a factor play in there as well. So, I mean, there's lots going on in New York. It's not just as simple as, oh, we don't want to vote blue anymore. But, I mean, when you talk about, like say, upstate New York, there's a lot of Republican voters up there. It's always sort of presented as being blue only. But, you know, you're never going to see it go wholly red. But this was important in terms of how the House race panned out. Very important, significant. Right, let's zoom in on some of these races and let me just show you some of the horror. Oh, actually, let's just get this out the way. It just doesn't fit anywhere. But the TikTok dances that were happening were just awful. And there's just nowhere to put this, but just as a little palate cleanser before we look at some of these races. This was Beto.
Boom, bone, long hair star. Thick in the hips, come get in my car. For a yellow bone, long hair star. Thick in the hips, come get in my car.
I don't even know what that means. A Texas woman who just wants rights, and then it's Beto like creepily prowling up behind her. Like, I don't know. Gretchen Whitman was at it as well, doing TikTok dances. I mean, I just think the state of fucking American politics is like just so... It's worse than it ever was, guys. It used to be vaguely serious when I was like a teenager. Anyway, let's also, I guess, and I need to get that off screen, don't I? Now, I tweeted out back in 2020, right? I tweeted, there he is. Hello, Master Blaster. It's good to see you. I tweeted out in 2020 when the popular thing to do was you were supposed to believe the election was stolen if you wanted to have any kind of like vague conservative credibility. Like why you would want that, I don't know. But you couldn't, you weren't going to be, you weren't going to be able to traffic in those cool YouTuber circles if you weren't going, stop the steal, release the Kraken, or whatever the fuck it was. And I tweeted out, like, if you want to have any serious political credibility moving forward, don't get drawn into it. Yes, it's crazy Biden got 81 million votes, right? Like, and of course, even Tucker Carlson kind of like alludes to it being bullshit every time on his monologues. He goes, 81 million votes, people. Huh. And then he does that fake laugh. It's ridiculous, isn't it? He does that, doesn't he? You've seen it. So you've seen them. You've seen them, the Carlsons, haven't you? So look, the reality is what happened. Okay, why a lot of people got like baffled and couldn't understand why it went the way it went is simply because of how the American voting system works. And so during the pandemic, the Democrats very cannily and by the way, this is not just a repudiation of the blue criminal party. We'll talk about the red criminal party and the bullshit they pull as well, right? Because that's all of my stuff. Like, I'm not living there anymore. I can speak freely about what a shit show their politics are. There's no party affiliation here. So what they cannily did during the pandemic was they made this big push towards mail-in ballots. Let's increase the ease within which mail-in ballots can happen for safety reasons. And it was just a big push on that. And if you look at it, in multiple states, they do this thing called ballot harvesting, right? And a ballot harvesting is simply where a political operative goes and collects ballots on behalf of people who can't get down to the polls to put the card in the box. And you can go back and forth on this. Like, for example, there's a big hot button topic right now. Again, I think it's in Arizona. One operative went to an old people's home and got all of their ballots, and they all just happened to vote, Democrat, right? Which is entirely possible, right? Even though data shows us all people traditionally lean Republican. But some people say this is absolutely wrong and it shouldn't happen, right? Nobody should be going around collecting your votes. If you can't get down to the ballot and put that paper in a box or press the little button on the machine, you forfeit your right to vote. Other people believe, no, it's actually a really good thing. Why should being incapacitated or inconvenienced by your job, why should that stop you voting? And so the majority of states in America allow operatives to essentially go and bring these ballots in, these mail order ballots, right? So a lot of Republicans didn't realize what that meant and what it was going to do. And so there's no like rigging of the election. It's not fake. Every election since time immemorial in America has been broken in the sense that dead people have voted or erroneous ballots have been counted or some shenanigans have gone on. As I said, it's a banana republic on steroids. But I remember people at the time going, the dead voted in this election in 2020. Dead people voted. And then I just showed them it happened in 2000, it happened in 2004, it happened in 2008, it happened in 2012. It always happens. A few will always slip through the cracks, and you're going to probably get maybe more now with mail order ballots coming in. But no laws are being broken. Nothing's being... If you don't like it, you've got to vote to nominally change the system. Indeed, DeSantis said if they're ballot harvesting in their states, Republicans should be doing it too. But Republicans just stop the steal, idiots. So that's how you get 81 million for Biden, more than Obama, despite him being a corpse. That's how that happens. There's no great mystery to it. You just, but obviously everyone loses their minds, And also, it's rich coming from Republicans. Republicans passed laws, right, to stop. If you were waiting in line to cast a vote, They passed laws to say you can't have water or food brought to you in case it constitutes a bribe. And trust me, I couldn't believe it. You know, I was out there for the election in 2016, obviously. And the lines for these votes, it's like it's a whole fucking day you've got to give up to do it. It's you know, and you just got to stand there. Well, I hope I don't get thirsty, or it doesn't get baking hot, or I don't get hungry, or I don't have to get back to work. Voting is like, and Republicans are like, well, that's just how it should be, because that's what suits them. You look at all the data in every election, Republicans like to go on the day and vote on the day. They don't want to mail it in. They don't want anyone messing with it. They want to go there and vote and make a big deal about it. And that's why what always happens is, and what's happened in these last elections, including these ones, they go, they vote. Republicans get a lead. Whoop. Then we start counting in the mail-in ballots after that, because that's how it's collated. And then, oh, wait, there's this big blue line. Yeah, because we're counting the mail-in ballots now. Ballot harvesting is a thing. It's all, you know, it's always gone on. It's expanded because of the new laws around mail-in ballots. No great mystery. No, and like I say, I won't even get into all the gerrymandering and all the other bullshit Republican parties have done in certain states down the years. It's just not worth going over. The bottom line is, this election is as free and fair as any election that there's ever been. And all that's going to happen is, we're not going to have a cold and sober discussion about, are we actually perhaps being a bit too lax in the votes? It's like the whole voter ID debate, right? Republicans say you must have an ID to vote, right? Which, by the way, a lot of countries practice that. You must be able to prove who you are. And obviously, Democrats say, no, that's really, really bad. That's racist, in fact. And so that's an almost uniquely American debate. It's not a discussion that happens anywhere else in the world. You either have ID or you don't. It's got nothing to do with racism. It's just got to do with, you know, can we have a secure election without it? And some countries do and think it should be easy to vote, and some countries don't. And that's all there is. And you just get on with it. Anyway, that's all there is to that. And anyone saying otherwise is a grifter. There's no machines, you know, that are doing. Put it this way: if you want to look at a rigged election, you just go back and you look at the Bush one. There it is, right there. Let's not pretend democracy is sacred in America. You've already done that. Bush already did things that would have shamed a tin pot dictator to become president. So, you know, right. This is something that is definitely worth having a sensible discussion about, though. This was Fetterman. Fetterman in Pennsylvania. Their campaign were highly aware that there was only two options for them. He could go on the debate, and it would be a disaster, or he could duck the debate, and that would be a disaster because of the perceptions are he's hiding, like Joe Biden in the basement. So they decided that they were going to play aggressive and play dirty. And this is one of the examples where, you know, look, and it's reported by CNN. This isn't Fox News or anything like this. So this is like, you know, they're on their side. but this was the Fetterman campaign actually went to a federal court and they wanted to sue, essentially petition the court to allow mail-in ballots to be counted even if they didn't have a date on them. So there was no way to tell whether they'd come in after the deadline, before. They wanted them to be counted. And so you will see things like this where you're going to go, I don't know how I feel about that. And obviously Republicans are going to tell you, this is indicative of all the corruption and our elections are no longer free and stop the stealing. And the Democrats are going to go, no, we should be counting everybody's votes. So what? Perhaps an elderly person forgot to put the date in. Do they lose their right as a citizen to vote? Which is kind of interesting in a country, which, by the way, if you've ever been to prison, you lose your right to vote if you've ever been a felon, but whatever. So I'll just read it from you here. Fetterman and voters his campaign is aligned with are hoping the federal court will supersede the state court's decision. The date instruction imposes unnecessary hurdles that eligible Pennsylvanians must clear to exercise their most fundamental right, resulting in otherwise valid votes being arbitrarily rejected without any reciprocal benefit to the Commonwealth, attorneys for Fetterman and the Democrats wrote in their new lawsuit filed Monday in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania. The date on a mail ballot envelope thus has no bearing on a voter's qualifications and serves no purpose other than to erect barriers to qualify voters exercising their fundamental constitutional right to vote. This unnecessary impediment violates the Civil Rights Act and the First and 14th Amendments in the U.S. Constitution, they wrote. Republicans have advocated for strict rules around mailed-in voting that would force ballots with missing information to be rejected. For me, you know, I'm in the mindset that if you can't just fill in the fucking form properly, but maybe I'm being harsh, you know? I think the barrier that they're talking about there is if there's no date on it, well, I don't know when the fuck it was filed, and anything after the deadline's not going to count, right? So, I don't know, but whatever. You get called racist if you say wacky things like that. In America. So anyway, that's just an example of some of the stuff that's going on around mail-in ballots right now and why some votes might squeeze through, some might not, and this is what Republicans are crying about and everything that's going on there. Now, let's have a look at the Walker campaign, because we're going to really focus on the Fetterman campaign in just a moment. So, I want to show you why it's staggering Herschel Walker is going to get a second crack at it despite everything. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna put that on hiatus. Actually, let me do this first. This part of the stream first, because I want to get this out the way. I talked about Trump being on the ballot and the Democrats quite wisely putting him there. What these midterm election results essentially mean. So, these are the Trump candidates so far. Politico has been tracking it. And there was a lot of thoughts that, like, Trump was some sort of Faustian pact the GOP had to make to get back in power. I think we now know from the midterm results that actually voters resoundingly reject the idea of Trump or any of his minions being anywhere near power again. Some of that is predicated on propaganda, like, oh, it was a coup, they were always overthrowing us, and they were going to come and kidnap all the politicians and take power. You know, some of it's based on that. Some of it's just based on Trump's a fucking asshole, you know? So, like, there's a lot to digest with that. But anyway, people thought Trump was a kingmaker, that an endorsement from Trump was going to get you over the line. What the midterm results show, with 3 races remaining among key Trump candidates. Actually, it's a coin toss. His endorsement doesn't mean anything. In fact, we can probably deduce it might hurt you a little bit in some areas. These were, of course, the Senate candidates he endorsed. And again, just look at how awful they are. You can see Ron Johnson winning in Wisconsin by a point. We pointed that out earlier. J.D. Vance, yeah, it's plus 7 points. It should be 10. It's double digits in Ohio every time. That's actually, you know, you should be a little bit embarrassed by that. Ted Budd squeaked across the line there in North Carolina. Blake Masters, Arizona, obviously got battered by the Dems, lost by 5. Mehmet Oz, in a ridiculous thing that we'll analyze in more depth, obviously lost by 5. And Herschel Walker, although he was a point behind in the polling, oh no, he was more than that actually. It doesn't matter because neither got the 50%, and now we have another runoff. So what can we deduce from that? Well, actually, races that were there for the taking, the Trump endorsement seems to have hurt them. I would go so far as to say if Herschel Walker could have kept it together, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, and not had the Trump endorsement, he might have done better down there. Who knows? Anyway, in the House votes, you can see here, just bam, you know, Majewski lost by 13, Gibbs lost by 13, Chabot by 5, blah, blah, blah. And these are the ones where already in Republican-leaning states, we've had a couple of narrow wins like David Schweikart and a narrow loss with Joe Kent. Trump's endorsement is bullshit now. It just doesn't mean anything because people are sick of him and they want to move on. And so I will certainly point to, if you're a Republican voter, if you're GOP leaning, what you really need to be thinking about now is obviously what DeSantis has done in Florida. DeSantis won a purple state by a landslide. You might disagree with his policies, but for whatever reason, it worked. In fact, I'll show you bring up the DeSantis stats for you so you can see for yourself just how decisive it was. So DeSantis here wins the governor race down there by like 19 points. Like, it's ridiculous. Huge gains in the Latino and Hispanic communities in Florida, which obviously the Republicans always love because they get to go, hey, we're not racist, look. And so, yeah, all that build the wall stuff, ignore that. And, he has been a galvanizing force in Florida with his policies. He's took no shit from the media. People in Florida like it. He kept Florida open during the pandemic. People liked it. When Disney were trying to put pressure on him over things he'd said and done and policies, he said, fuck you. Disney's beholden to Florida, not the other way around. People liked it. You might not like it, but Floridians in general liked it. And so this landslide win for DeSantis in a purple state gets the GOP thinking, actually, is DeSantis the future? In fact, multiple articles came out saying DeSantis is the future. And listen, this is all you need to know about how valid that is. He has Trump immediately on the offensive. Donald Trump wants party rival Ron DeSantis not to run for president in 2024. Now, if you've followed any of the stuff that I've done about American politics, you know that I said I could envision in 2024 a joint Trump-DeSantis ticket. Trump obviously is the presidential candidate, DeSantis is VP, and then a changeover, a la Reagan and Bush. That cannot happen now. Trump is box office poison. He really is no longer the winning ticket for the GOP. And what they need to do is ultimately get behind DeSantis. Now, what's actually clever is, and Trump is such a narcissist, he can't actually see that this is happening. DeSantis hasn't reacted to any of this in any conventional way. The media have tried to twist his words and said, he said something like, I fight the battles as I need to fight them. And he goes, that's about Trump. That's about Trump. No, it's not about Trump. The bottom line is, Donald Trump is going to talk himself out, of the nomination. He is, obviously, Democrats, everybody's going to be focusing on Trump to stop his run in 2024. And while all that media energy is on Trump, it's not on DeSantis. You will be reading articles in 2024, DeSantis, worse than Trump, DeSantis, the new Hitler. You'll see all of those, right? Everything they said about Trump, they'll try and tell you, actually, Trump wasn't that bad and DeSantis is worse. That's just Democrat-leaning media for you. That's just how that works. But the bottom line is he will get through, and the GOP will rightly identify that Trump is not the winning horse to back here. Anyway, here's what he said. Speaking to reporters on his plane on Monday night, Trump said, I think if he runs, he could hurt himself very badly. I think the base would not like it. I don't think it would be good for the party. The former US president also warned that he would tell reporters things about the Florida governor that won't be very flattering. And what you have to remember is the GOP are already on the outs with Trump. Trump actually said about Republican candidates, don't vote for those guys. He's talking about party unity. He's gone against GOP members. He's called out people like Mitch McConnell, and called out Republicans and said they're rhinos and stuff like that. It's Republican in name only, if you've never heard that term. And so there is no party unity with Trump. There's Trump unity with Trump. You fall in line. We know this about him. He's been president. We saw it. You fall in line. You obey what he says, you never contradict him or criticize him, or you're fired. He treats his administration like the fucking apprentice, for God's sake. So when he starts saying things like, oh, I'm going to tell you dark truths about DeSantis if he runs against me, the GOP's going, all right, motherfucker, do it. Talk yourself out of it, bro. Also, what a genius move about Elon allowing him back on Twitter, which, again, I'm saving that for the next Elon Musk stream we do. But I tell you, Elon is a professed DeSantis supporter. And I know not every billionaire is playing five-dimensional chess, and some of them are just wealthy morons, right? Yes, that's a given. The idea, by the way, that wealth generation means you have to be smart, like some sort of an actual genius. Nah, I never fucked with that idea. But anyway, by allowing him back on Twitter, should he take the bait and start tweeting again, he's only going to hurt his own prospects. What people wanted to see was some evolution of Trump. If you were on the fence about Trump, what did he learn? What did he learn about what happened with the transfer of power? Is he going to be less brash? Is he going to say less crazy things? Is he going to be less aggressive? Is he going to stop riling up his base? Is he going to stop like leaning into the QAnon shtick? This is what people wanted to see from Trump. Would we see the evolution of an iconoclast into a politician? Someone just knock the rough edges off. We don't want a system politician, but we do want someone with just a bit of gravitas. No, he's learned absolutely fucking nothing. In fact, he's coming back more enraged, more bitter, more prone to leaning into conspiracy theories, and simply using the GOP as a vehicle for his own narcissism and ego. He doesn't care about the party or its prospects. And I'm telling you, the GOP are going to hang him out to dry this time. I remember before he got the nomination, there was a moment when in the original debates, which I was watching from a house in Vegas, I think like 2015, basically nobody took him serious. And he came in and he called Marco little Marco, and he did all the bits that he did, and he absolutely hammered everyone, and fucking, and nobody took him serious until it was too late. Nobody's going to make that mistake this time, right? He is not the road back to power for the GOP. So yes, him and DeSantis do appear to be on collision course. What was also interesting was Trump on Truth Social, which is where he lives now, was basically saying, people say DeSantis is the future. This is paraphrasing because he would never frame it this eloquently. But I got more votes than him in Florida. And it's like, you don't even understand the difference between like a fucking general election and a midterm governorship election. Whatever. Anyway, so that's something to all be mindful of. Right. Also, I was disheartened to see Lauren Bobbitt re-elected. It was narrow. It looked for a long period of time during the counting of the votes. It's here. It still is white, but it certainly should be red. As I said, her opposition has conceded now. As of 3 days ago, actually. This map's probably a little bit out of date. But you can see how close it was. And everybody was spiking the football and saying she'd lost. She was like 3 points down, but it's because idiots don't actually look at the fucking data. There was heavy Republican-leaning, areas to be counted that hadn't come in, and so she squeaked across. Now this just shows you, and again, candidate quality, because Lauren Bobbitt, she's been lied about by some PACs. Here, I'll show you. And this just shouldn't happen. These types of things shouldn't happen. This is a Democratic group made multiple false claims in this dramatic allegation about Lauren Bobbitt's past. And what those allegations were, there was something called American Muckrakers, which is a Democrat activist pact, and it said that she'd had multiple abortions and used to work as an escort. That was literally just put out there in the public domain. It's hard to believe, by the way, that this type of thing can sort of happen to a woman in politics, and everybody kind of ignores it because she's red as opposed to blue. These types of smear campaigns. Anyway, that pack that did that to her did come out and said, listen, all right, it was sloppy and we had published inaccuracies. And this is just another day in American politics. Yep, she used to be a sex worker and had multiple abortions. Our bad, we got it wrong. Are there any penalties for that? Oh, none whatsoever, because it's American politics. Whoopsie doodle. See you for the next election. So, I have some sympathy, irrespective of who Lauren Bobbitt is, and she's simply awful. But I do have some sympathy because that's the type of thing that can happen to any woman. And I'll show you an even more vile example when we get to the Fetterman stuff. But I'll tell you some things about Lauren Bobbitt, that why I think she's horrible. She invoked Holocaust imagery when talking about vaccination just recently. I believe she was using the phrase the needle Nazis and other things. I've played you a clip before of the time she implied Ilhan Omar might be a terrorist, and saying she was worried to see her carrying a backpack. She made up a story about why she carries a gun. She did a pro-Second Amendment campaign advertisement where she said said, after a violent incident outside my business, I took advantage of Colorado's open carry laws and began to carry at work. But then it turned out what had actually happened was there was a physical altercation 3 blocks down the road from the restaurant she used to own when she was a business lady. And after that altercation, somebody called Andrew Green ran 3 blocks to outside of her restaurant, where he collapsed and then died of a methamphetamine overdose. She herself was never in risk, never needed to draw her firearm. The violent altercation didn't happen near her business. So what else? She's like invoked little things where she said she was kind of like pro QAnon in some way. I'll read you. This is from a 2020 interview where she went on a QAnon supporter podcast called Steel Truth, and she said, "Are you aware of the QAnon theory?" she was asked, and she said, "I am familiar with that. That's more of my mom's thing. She's a little fringe. Everything I've heard of Q, I hope it is real." Now remember, if you're not familiar with QAnon, QAnon is the belief that the people in power are satanic worshipping pedophiles that kill children to farm a drug called adrenochrome that gives them superhuman power, strength, and longevity. And Trump knows this, uncovered the whole conspiracy, and has actually had them all in the process of being arrested, and is still secretly in power as a shadow president. Lauren Bobbitt says she hopes that's real. Let me continue. Everything I've heard of Q, I hope that this is real, because it only means America is getting stronger and better, and people are returning to conservative values, and that's what I am for. And so everything I have heard of this movement is only motivating and encouraging and bringing people together stronger. And if this is real, then it really could be great for our country. I do believe as well, in addition to that, she has also violated, campaign finance laws. They all do that. Everyone's done it. AOC was accused of doing it. It's one of them things. Everybody bends the rules. I don't know. Anyway, she's just fucking awful. Not to mention numerous borderline homophobic statements, race baiting. She's trash. I mean, she's not who you want representing you, and it's no wonder the race was close. Indeed, if it wasn't for party affiliation, she simply couldn't have got over the line, She's just garbage. So anyway, that was Lauren Bobbitt, why she's awful, and it is sad that she gets to ride again, essentially, and, gets in. I can also now get you into the Herschel Walker stuff. I do think we're ready for that. Yeah, we're good. Right. Herschel Walker. Richard, why are you always going against Herschel? He played American football. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. You like that sport, don't you? Yeah, sometimes being good at one thing don't mean you should get into something else. Oh yeah, well remembered, Tactical Al Sign. Yeah, she also tried to get a gun past a metal detector in Congress, strictly against the rules, and had an altercation with a security guard that tried to make a walk through the metal detector and obviously confiscate the firearm. She's simply a wonderful person. I've talked a lot about how political grifters don't even really follow what's going on, and this is just a prime example. So during the Lauren Bobbitt race, you can see here, David Pacman, who everyone says is like this fantastic, he's actually good, he's actually a moderate, you should totally listen to him. He's like, how great is it that Bobbitt got booted? And the only reason he tweeted this out is because it was trending. Everyone was spiking the football about her being out and 100% she'd lost and blah, blah, blah. And he just uncritically repeated it. A serious political commentator, not even looking at the data as it comes in. And then goes, oops, I wrongly thought this race was called. Yep, thanks for the engagement. It's all a grift. These people don't know what they're talking about. I don't doubt their interest, but I doubt their competency. Anyway, Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker, it's weird because he has these moments where he seems to know how to talk to the good religious folk of Georgia. That seems to be his strength. Here's, for example, a video of him declaring himself a warrior. Okay. This was the first thing I just want to play you, actually. Here it is. This is where he declares himself a warrior for God.
But what's so funny, they don't realize that I'm not a politician. I don't look like one, don't talk like one, don't act like one, because I'm that warrior for God. that he prepared me to come right now to straighten someone out. And the way I had to straighten him out, it started last Friday night when I was standing up on that stage when he's going to throw those scriptures on me. And he said he was a Matthew 25. You know, in Matthew 25, it talks about when I was hungry, you fed me. When I didn't have clothes, you clothed me. But it didn't say when I needed your help, you evicted me, did it? Didn't say anything about that, but he didn't want to mention that. And then all of a sudden, he's going to get smart on me and blame me for it. And I'm like, sir, I didn't write the article. It's the first time I ever seen it. I didn't know you evicted people that needed your help. And then he got mad and threw Dr. King's name in it. That's what you do when you're making excuses. He threw Dr. King's name, and he even threw the great Congressman John Lewis' name in it. There.
So, you can see here, this is the appeal of Herschel Walker. I have absolutely no question. He does know his Bible quotes. He does know his scripture. I do believe he's very sincere about his faith to a certain degree, as I'll reveal in a moment. And people like this. Georgia, obviously, his base is, a lot of religious Christians, obviously a lot of black neighborhoods that embrace Christianity, have local churches. It's very routine. You go to church on Sunday, you wear your best gear, and you go to church on Sunday, and he really appeals to that demographic. Obviously, he can converse quite intelligently around the Bible, and what he was doing here was he was talking about, the Democrats and obviously how people were being evicted during the pandemic, and even though it was the Democrats that proposed the moratorium in the first place, but he's saying, that's not what it says in the Bible, right? We're going to look after each other and help each other out. So you can sort of go, okay, that makes sense. He also has a line of snark that I suppose can be quite appealing to some people. Hopefully this video is going to work this time. Yep, there it is.
Now he don't want to talk. All I just see him do is run all these things, lying to you, telling you you've been a good sinner. He hasn't been a good sinner. He's been lying to you the whole time. He went to Washington and told you that he was going to represent you, didn't he? And all he did is voted for Joe Biden 96% of the time. He went to Washington and said he was going to lower your taxes, didn't he? No, he didn't. He raised your taxes and spent your money. Did he not do that? He went to Washington and said he was going to represent the men and women in blue. What did he do? Call them names and stuff. Then he went to Washington and said he's going to represent the military. Did you hear him say that? And yet now they're bringing pronouns in the military. I can tell you right now, his pronouns are going to be former senator.
And there it is. He's mocking the pronouns in the military thing, and obviously a lot of people that are traditional do think that's a little bit silly. They want their institutions to be recognizable as they were when they were a child and younger. And obviously, he's happy to throw in a little joke, isn't he? And go, oh, his pronouns are going to be former senator. Yeah, got him. And of course, that's a terrible joke. Jace is completely right. He should have just gone were, but he didn't, did he? Because he's Herschel Walker. But he did well enough. He got a chair, and obviously it's like, hey, remember me? I used to play for college ball. Brilliant stuff. And that's basically his appeal. The problem he's had, and this has been highlighted repeatedly in the campaign from Warnock, is he doesn't practice what he preaches, like a lot of people that use the gospel to try and win political points. And you can see he's on a very pro-life ticket. Obviously, that's, again, abortion's on the ballot. Herschel Walker has been accused now by 2 women of having paid for secret abortions from infidelities in his past. And it's like, that's probably going to derail the whole biblical thing. This is from the report here on WSB TV. A second woman has come forward with allegations that U.S. Senate candidate Herschel Walker paid for her to have an abortion. The new allegation surfaced just weeks after the Daily Beast report that Walker paid for a 2009 abortion for the mother of one of his children. The new woman said she had a 6-year relationship with Walker and he paid for an abortion in 1993. Walker, who has vehemently opposed abortion rights as the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in Georgia, denied both the women's allegations. I'm done with this foolishness. I've already told people this is a lie, and I'm not going to entertain this lie continued alone, Walker said during a campaign event in Dillard. The Democrats are doing whatever they can to win this seat. The second woman, who asked to be referred to as Jane Doe, spoke during a news conference held by her attorney, Gloria Allred, on Wednesday. It's sad I cannot show you my face or use my name for fear of reprisals against myself and my family. I am not a coward, but I am a realist. I choose to protect my identity to protect those I love. Jane Doe said she had a romantic, intimate relationship that started in 1987 when Walker was still with the Dallas Cowboys and continued after his various trades to the Minnesota Vikings and Philadelphia Eagles. She says she has voicemails, letters, and receipts to prove their relationship. When I told Herschel what had happened, the pregnancy, he was upset. He said he was going to go back with me to the clinic the next day for me to have the abortion. He drove me to the clinic the next day and waited for hours in a parking lot until I came out. He then drove me to get medications and supplies as prescribed. And of course, if you're Republican, they say it's all a setup and a scam, a la Kavanaugh. If you're a Democrat, they go, look at the fucking state of this hypocrite. The bottom line is, though, it certainly is not going to play out well in the runoff. I'm sure Warnock is going to be tagging this up a lot more, and it'll work. Warnock will win the runoff almost certainly, barring some sort of insanity. I'll also just point out, by the way, if you... I can't even believe what I'm about to show you. There's red flags around Herschel Walker, let's say. This was another speech he gave. Herschel Walker veered off in a campaign speech to rant about werewolves killing vampires. Let me just read you this. U.S. Senate candidate Herschel Walker of Georgia delivered a bizarre diatribe about vampires and werewolves during a stump speech in McDonough, Georgia, on Wednesday, in a verbose example of the former athlete's ongoing unorthodox candidacy. I think I've actually got a video of it.
I want to tell you to keep the faith. Oh, you ever watch a stupid movie late at night hoping it's going to get better? Keep watching it anyway. Because the other night I was watching this movie. I was watching this movie called Freak Night, or some type of night. But it was about vampires. I don't know if you know vampires are some cool people, are they not? But I'm going to tell you something that I found out. A werewolf can kill a vampire. Did you know that? I never knew that, so I didn't want to be a vampire anymore. I wanted to be a werewolf. But then anyway, as I'm watching this movie, and then you can tell how stupid it is because it's 1 a.m. So I'm watching my TV. These kids watching their TV, a vampire kill on their TV. So you know it's kind of stupid, but I'm still watching though. As I'm watching this show, what was funny, these kids had a vampire in their attic at their house. So they was watching their TV. Now I'm watching my TV as they watching their TV, or they see the vampire killer on their TV. So they win this contest to bring this actor. Now y'all got to stay with me. Bring this actor who's a vampire killer from their TV to get rid of this real life vampire in their attic. So as this actor comes to their home, he got all the right stuff. He got all the right stuff because, you got to have a stake and got to have a thing to kill him in the heart. And he got a necklace of garlic because that worked. I don't know what it does, but it worked. You got to have a cross because it burns. I know that worked. And then all of a sudden, this is what was so funny about it. As they're walking through the house, this guy got the holy water. He blessing the house, this actor. Now, he's all fake. He's blessing the house with his holy water. They walked upstairs and this vampire looking real good in this black suit. Whoa, that sounds like Senator Warnock, doesn't it? Looking all good in this black suit, floated from the ceiling. He floated from the ceiling looking good and cool. And I'm thinking, whoa, they better get out of that house. If somebody float from your ceiling, get out of that house. That's not your house. But as he floated from the ceiling, the kids jumped behind their hero. As they jumped behind their hero, the guy jumped in front of him with this holy water, threw it on the vampire's forehead. He covered his eyes. Then he took his hand away. He started laughing. And he said, that don't work. He took the cross, he put it on the vampire's forehead. And the vampire didn't even do anything. He said, that don't work. And that's the way it is in our life. It doesn't work unless you got faith. It is time for us to have faith. We got to have faith in our fellow brother. We got to have faith in this country. We got to have faith in the elected officials. And right now, that's the reason I'm here.
Now, Herschel Walker, I don't know where he got werewolves from, because what he's described there is, he has described I believe 1988, I think it was, could be 86, could be 87, but it's 80s, late 80s. He's described the film Fright Night. Right? He has described, and it got remade with Colin Farrell in it recently, but I'm guessing he saw the original. And spoilers for a film from the 80s, Fright Night, it's actually a good film. It's very interesting. It's about teenage frustration, budding sexuality, and it's wrapped up with a vampire mythos, which has always had sort of a sexual edge to it. That was always a subtext in vampire stories anyway. And it's got the late, great Roddy McDowall in it. And Roddy McDowall plays a late-night TV host who, while posing as a Van Helsing-style vampire hunter, introduces late-night horror movies in the same style that, like, Elvira used to do it and stuff like that. And he'll introduce a horror movie and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the teenage protagonist is convinced there is a vampire living next door. And so he goes out to get Roddy McDowall's character, right, to come and basically, you know, exorcise or kill the vampire next door, because he's the great vampire hunter. That's the character he plays on TV. Roddy McDowall doesn't want to do it at first, but then he acquiesces and he agrees. And so he goes to the house, and he expects to just calls the vampire up first, and he goes, listen, I got a kid, he's scared. Will you just play along with this? And then he's out of my life and he's out of your life. And the vampire goes, yeah. And so Roddy McDowall goes in, looks around, says, look, he can't be a vampire. Look. But then Roddy McDowall notices, oh shit, the motherfucker ain't got a reflection, and it shits him up. Because now he believes. So now Roddy McDowall decides, I gotta murk this fucking vampire. So he goes back and he tries to do it with the holy water and the cross, but he has no faith. That's what Herschel Walker was talking about. He has no faith. He doesn't believe in God. He's a lapsed Catholic, so it doesn't work. There's no werewolves in that movie. I've just realized I have just done a Herschel Walker style speech there. It's not lost on me. But the point being, I've seen the movie, and there are no werewolves in it anywhere to be seen. So I don't know why he's talking about why werewolves can kill a vampire. I don't know why he says he wants to be a werewolf. I don't know what that means within the context of a fucking political campaign. Hell of a movie, though. So that's Herschel Walker, soon to be out of the race. Right, where to begin with this? Oh, man. Fetterman, the body horror of the Fetterman campaign. Let's try and make something out of this. Okay, everybody knows Fetterman's had a terrible stroke, a real serious one. He's lucky to be alive. And what should have happened? And, you know, I've said this. For me, I think there comes a point where you just have to look at the human. And I don't think Fetterman's a bad dude or anything like that. I got nothing against him. But he should have withdrawn from the race. I don't know, I don't know enough about the specifics as to whether they could have found another candidate or whether that would have been essentially conceding, because it was right at the start. It was literally after the race started and he was the nominee. He had the stroke. I don't know what the laws in Pennsylvania are around that. And I wouldn't even pretend to know. So it seems like you just don't force a man to go through this for the sake of power. It was really demeaning. It was awful to watch. It was cruel. And, now the hard work begins. You've won the vote, and now you've got all the pressure of being a politician. Almost certainly going to shave years off his life. I hope the story doesn't have a horrible ending. But anyway, Dasha Burns, and Dash Burns is a journalist for NBC News, said, in small talk before my interview with Fetterman, it wasn't clear he understood what I was saying. And this was the first person-to-person interview Fetterman had done since having a stroke, but he had to use closed captioning for what I talked about earlier. His brain can't process stuff auditorily. He has to see it optically. And this was the segment they ran on him.
Considered a toss-up. Our Dasha Burns spoke with Democrat John Fetterman in his first in-person sit-down interview since he suffered a stroke. And Dasha, this was not a typical candidate interview.
No, Lester, because of his stroke, Fetterman's campaign required closed captioning technology for this interview to essentially read our questions as we ask them. And Lester, in small talk before the interview, without captioning, it wasn't clear he was understanding our conversation. Can voters trust that you will be able to do this job on day one?
Yeah, of course.
This is Pennsylvania Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman's first in-person sit-down interview since a stroke sidelined him from the campaign trail for months.
That auditory processing where I'll hear someone speaking, but sometimes I'll be able to be precise on what exactly that they're saying. I use captioning.
His campaign required that he be allowed to use a transcription program on his computer during our interview.
I always thought I was pretty empathetic, emphatic. I think I was very, empathetic. That's an example of the stroke, empathetic.
Yeah.
I always thought I was very empathetic before having a stroke. But now after having that stroke, I really understand, much more kind of the challenges that Americans have day in and day out.
So you say you're on the road to full recovery, but right now, voters really have to take your word for it. We've asked for your medical records. We've asked to have a conversation with someone from your medical team, to interview your physician. You've declined those requests. Why?
Well, I feel like we have been very transparent in a lot of different ways. When our doctor has already given a letter saying that I'm able to serve and to be running.
I mean, respectfully, that letter from your physician, that was 6 months ago. Don't voters deserve to know your status now?
Being in front of thousands and thousands of people and having interviews and getting around all across Pennsylvania, that gives everybody and the voters decide, if they think that it's really the issue.
Polls show Fetterman's lead is shrinking against Republican Dr. Mehmet Oz. It's now a toss-up race that could determine control of the Senate. Republicans focusing on crime. In particular, Fetterman's votes on the parole board.
Fetterman says he's trying to get as many criminals out of prison as he can,
including votes in favor of paroling convicted murderers. Are you soft on crime?
Of course not. I'm actually effective on crime. And I believe in second chances, and I've run on that record.
Meanwhile, Fetterman going after Dr. Oz on abortion rights.
Dr. Oz likes to make fun of me that I might miss a word, but he's missed 2 words, and that is a yes or no on the national abortion ban. If you're going to be our next senator, you have to give the answer.
Lester Fetterman told us he is committed to debating Dr. Oz on October 25th, where he will also be using closed captioning.
So you can see for yourself there, and that's with the captioning. It's a struggle, And the problem a lot of people had was that you don't know how much heavy lifting the captioning is doing. He's got a team of people that essentially run the machine. You could see them when they did the wide shot there. And, some people are worried about him. Is he being fed the answers? What's going on? Yeah, it's just fucking sad. Is just the word for it. No one should have to go through this. The American political process will strip you of all dignity. You will have no secrets by the end of your candidacy. And the vague hope is that, you win and then you just have to toe a fucking party line. What, you had your own ideas? Fuck you. Party says this. So it's a lot to put yourself through. And as someone who's helped nurse a relative back from not 1 but 2 strokes, I can't express more sympathy or empathy for what that toll takes. Equally, I've got to say, my gut instinct is this person, I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me that we don't know enough about which parts of the brain were affected, and no doubt we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Anyway, because Dasha Burns, even though she's part of the journalist Democrat intelligentsia, she got vehemently attacked for saying she believed that she didn't believe, now I'm talking like Fetterman, she didn't believe that Fetterman could understand what she was saying, right? She basically was absolutely mauled by every other journalist because they were terrified her reporting was going to twist the race, subvert it, cost Fetterman the seat, cost the Dems the seat. And you can see that NBC reporters comment about Fetterman draws criticism. Why is this news? This is what you always have to ask yourself. Whenever you see a headline, why is this news? Well, it's news because this is a warning. That's what this is. This is a warning to any journalist that wants to break rank and say, hang on a minute, is this Democrat candidate actually legit? No, you can't do that. Not now, not ahead of the midterms. The time for that maybe is later. Maybe. And so this is, the Associated Press. Remember, they fly the flag of neutrality, right? Check this out. An NBC News correspondent who interviewed Pennsylvania Senate candidate John Fetterman says on-air remarks she made about him having difficulty following part of their conversation should not be seen as commentary on his fitness for office. She was essentially forced into a half apology. But reporter Dasha Burns' comment that Fetterman appeared to have trouble understanding small talk prior to the interview has attracted attention, and Republicans have retweeted it as they seek advantage in the closely followed Senate race between Fetterman and Republican Mehmet Oz. Fetterman, a Democrat, suffered a stroke on May 13th, and his health has emerged as a major issue in the campaign. Fetterman appeared to have little trouble answering the questions after he read them, although NBC showed him fumbling for the word empathetic. Now, isn't that weird? This is how you spot bias in the media. He did not have little trouble answering the questions at all. He was still struggling even with the closed captioning. And, yeah, he fumbled for the word empathetic. The idea, by the way, NBC deliberately left that in as some sort of pro-Republican plot or some plot against Fetterman is absolutely ridiculous, but that's the intimation. Burns said that when the captioning device was off, it wasn't clear he was understanding our conversation. And that's exactly what he says is happening. He says himself, I cannot auditorily process it. This is just nonsense. Business reporter and podcaster Kara Swisher, who had a stroke herself in 2011, said on Twitter, maybe this reporter is just bad at small talk. A New York Magazine reporter, Rebecca Traister, who interviewed the candidate for a cover story titled The Vulnerability of John Fetterman, tweeted that his comprehension is not at all impaired. He understands everything. It's just that he reads it and responds in real time. It's a hearing auditory challenge. Burns said she understands that different reporters have different experiences with Fetterman. Our reporting did not and should not comment on fitness for office, Burns tweeted on Wednesday. This is for voters to decide. What we push for as reporters is transparency. That's our job. It didn't stop there. The attack was pretty wide-reaching. In fact, in no particular order, the media really wanted to make this a disability issue, essentially. And let me just show you his wife. I hate to link to this account, RNC Research. It's obviously Republican research, but the mainstream media don't report on these things. And listen here. This is where John Fetterman's wife, Giselle, says that Dasha Burns should face consequences for what she said.
Rage, because I think that's a really unhealthy feeling. And when you feel those things, it only harms yourself. But I just, what a disservice that she did to not only my husband, but to anyone facing a disability and working through it. And I don't know how there were not consequences, right? I mean, there are consequences for folks in these positions who are any of the isms. I mean, she was ableist, and that's what she was in her interview. It was appalling to the entire disability community, and I think to journalism. So I was shocked. I'm still really upset about it. And I think the positive is it's brought a lot of conversations around accommodations, around rights, around ableism, right? I mean, ableism was trending on Twitter. It just shows there's so much work to do, but these networks have to take accountability, right? Like, where is your training?
Right.
It was appalling to see. And you see that in schools, you see that with young children. You don't expect to see it at this level. And, I haven't heard an apology. It hasn't come. I am hopeful that, they will reflect and see that they did an incredible disservice to all Americans.
So it was a disservice to all Americans, evidently, and I don't know why. And on that went. In fact, actually, what was really weird is so worried they were about his health, they actually were doing profiles on her in case, to say, oh, hey, having her in the background, having her behind him is a good thing. You can see here, this was Bloomberg. Giselle Fetterman spotlights her history as an undocumented migrant. There was all these puff pieces coming out about her and how amazing she was. And it's like, well, she's his wife, I get it. Like, she's an individual. She might have an interesting story, but why is that relevant to the political race? It's him who's running, right? So you can see here, John Fetterman says his wife inspires his policy in Pennsylvania. Since his stroke, she's a key surrogate against Mehmet Oz. There was also this weird claim here, which, sort of tipped the gaff a little bit from Kara Voigt. She said, I wrote about Giselle Fetterman and how her husband's stroke transformed her from a reluctant political spouse to de facto candidate. She was the de facto candidate. This tweet, by the way, then deleted. And the journalist going, oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. That was obviously in Rolling Stone. So, these things covered up. But yes, it was big push to try and make it a issue about disabilities. And again, I'm just going to sort of go through all of the bits and pieces here in no particular order because there was lots of coverage around this. And then we'll get to the nightmare of the debate. Here we go. MSNBC, they were very strong on this, both before and after the debate. Disabled Americans have the right to be represented and most importantly to work, and that includes working for the US government. Now, nobody, of course, said otherwise. Nobody made any claim to the contrary, but no medical records were released, so we can't ascertain their fitness for office, and I think that's a reasonable expectation. There was a number of videos circulating. I played you some of them where Fetterman was struggling to talk while he was on the campaign trail and was doing embarrassing, cringeworthy speeches. And you can see here, this was Benjamin Goggin of NBC News, by the way, the much maligned network that published the Dasha Burns piece. Doctored videos of Dr. Oz Senate seat challenger John Fetterman that exaggerate his speech issues post-stroke went viral this week on Twitter and TikTok, bringing in hundreds of thousands of views. The videos, and you'll notice he uses this word here, the videos appeared to be edited to remove audience sound, where Fetterman paused for applause, making it appear as if he was pausing for no reason. Another clip cut Fetterman off mid-sentence, creating the impression he was speaking nonsensically. Now, of course, they weren't doctored, they weren't altered, he was struggling to speak, they were just simply edited for time because of the format they were in. But, you know, that journalist's gonna journalist. New York Times went with, John Fetterman is a disabled American who needs technology to do his job, so what? Again, I get it, but when it comes to cognitive impairment or potential cognitive impairment, it's not the same as a wheelchair or a bionic arm, is it? It's a bit different when they're making ostensibly important decisions. Adam Kelsey from Facebook News said this, kind of bewildering as well. Nearly everyone I know watches TV and movies with captioning from time to time. Criticizing Fetterman's use of it is akin to arguing no deaf person can hold office. That said, I'm a firm believer that he and all political candidates should publicly release the medical records. So, yeah, we're going to do covering fire first, and then secondarily, we're gonna ask after that. So I mean, yeah, he's not deaf. He's not deaf. He's had a fucking massive stroke. He's not deaf. Obviously, we already alluded to Kara Swisher, who herself had a stroke in 2011. This was from a Washington Post article, another Washington Post article that said Fetterman's use of captions is common in stroke recovery. Experts say closed captions are a common tool for people with auditory processing issues or other hearing issues. The experts said. And what the experts should tell you is not all strokes are equal. Not all strokes occur in the same part of the brain. Different parts of the brain affect different things. So the idea that captions is common in all stroke recovery, that is actually a lie. If you have a stroke that impacts your auditory processing, then they're common. But they have deliberately obfuscated that. As I said, you know, the person in my family that had 2 strokes never needed captioning at all. It was their speech centers that were affected. They could understand everything perfectly. They just couldn't articulate themselves. They lost mobility in speech. But it's okay. It's okay to tell that lie because it's in service of the DNC, the Holy Party. And Kara Swisher said, good piece. I had aphasia too, and it resolved, though can come back in a very small way, like losing single words when I am tired. All sensory and not cognitive. Fetterman's use of captions is common in stroke recovery, experts say. And again, repeats that at the end, even though you are linking the article, that also makes that same ridiculous claim. Then you had, I believe this is another claim saying, hey, having a machine that essentially enables you to understand speech is the same as using a teleprompter. This was in response to John Fetterman saying, I'll be better in January, right? That was his claim. And again, if that's true, can we see a doctor's note that absolutely says that? As opposed to the like 1 paragraph letter you released that where a doctor said, I believe you're fit to serve office. But look at this. This is Lawrence O'Donnell saying, I have a confession to make. I used a teleprompter in this interview last night. The truth is I am not able to do my show without a teleprompter. That's very true of every TV news host who was discussing the way John Fetterman does interviews. It's like, okay, yeah, but have you had a massive stroke? The answer again is no. Reaction to the NBC coverage as well was ridiculous. This was if NBC News goes all in on bad. This is from David Rothschild, an economist, who said if NBC News goes all in on bad faith attacks on John Fetterman and they help Republican Dr. Oz win the PA Senate seat, confident Republicans will then recognize mainstream media as an essential and beneficial part of our democracy and stop inciting violence against journalists. So, yeah, in other words, sarcasm. There. You had this from David Macau, sorry. This is from BuzzFeed News. Oh, it's David Mack. My bad. Sorry, it's David Mack, Australia. Spoke to disability advocates about that Fetterman interview. They're not happy, and this was disability advocates say the response to John Fetterman using closed captioning is disgraceful. The Pennsylvania Democrat used live transcription in his first on-air interview since having stroke, but advocates feel NBC News focused too much on his mistakes. I do believe as well in that article, I cut out a little segment. They actually said this in that article. The way Burns handled that interview will only worsen attitudes and violence towards disabled people. So in other words, we're still doing the classic, we can accuse anyone of stochastic terrorism if they say anything we don't like. So, of course, there is absolutely no data point that suggests this. There's no data point that suggests violence towards disabled people is on the rise. There's nothing. It's just shrieking hysteria without any validity whatsoever to try and shame people into saying, oh no, Fetterman's okay. And I'll tell you, if Fetterman was so okay, when was the last time you saw something like this on television to discuss a political candidate?
What's interesting, let me show you here something. The stroke, which was on May 13th, so about 5 months ago, seemed to affect his ability to sort of comprehend or understand spoken speech. So what he seems to be doing then is then sort of relying more on his visual part of his brain, which is back here, to read the words. And then he's responding pretty quickly. So, we don't, as you heard there, we don't know what his medical records show. We don't know how much this affected him immediately after his stroke. So what his recovery has looked like so far. What's interesting.
So yes, CNN had to use a brain prop, a multicolored brain prop to try and tell their viewers that actually Fetterman's okay, because it's just this part of the brain that got fucked, and probably it's all going to be all right, although we've not seen any medical records either, so whatever, but look at the pretty colours on this brain. Now, it was clear that actually Dasha Burns was right, and they had low expectations going into the debate that Fetterman had tried to wriggle out of for obvious reasons. This was Dasha Burns with a memo from the Fetterman camp on what to expect. We'll admit this isn't John's format, pointing to the closed captioning aspect as unprecedented, closing with, John is going to win this race even if he doesn't win the debate, which obviously turned out to be prophetic. Now, shall we get to the debate itself? Now, I'll say this in the interest of, again, if you've had a relative who's had a stroke, or you've got a relative that's infirm in some way, or you really struggle with cringe, you struggled with that earlier segment, I'll just say, for the next bit, you can probably just tune the fuck out, mute the stream. There will be a lot of cringe. There will be a lot of things that might be difficult for you to sort of see, starting with the clip I'm about to play. So you can bounce and get out now if you don't want to see these things. This is how Fetterman opened the debate.
You're running for a seat that could decide the balance of power in Washington. What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi. Good night, everybody.
Hi. Good night, everybody. That was his strong debate opening. And it only goes downhill from there, unfortunately. It's awful. He got stung multiple times over the course of the debate. Dr. Oz brought up the incident I've told you about many times, where he heard some fireworks going off, immediately got a shotgun, ran outside and pointed, and this was while he was in elected office, and pointed a shotgun at the nearest unarmed black person who was simply jogging. He got asked about that in the debate here.
The stage has broken the law, we believe. John Fetterman took a shotgun, chased a unarmed African-American man, and put the gun, apparently, according to that man, to his chest. John, you weren't pulled over by the police. They let you go. You were the mayor at the time. Why haven't you apologized to that unarmed, innocent black man who you put a shotgun to his chest?
All right. We will allow a 30-second response to that, Mr. Fetterman, specifically what he was saying referring to the incident in Braddock.
No, I made the opportunity to defend our community as the chief law enforcement officer there. Everybody in Braddock, an overwhelmingly majority community of black community, all understood what happened. You know, they understood what happened, and everybody agreed that, and nobody believes that it was anything about me making a split-second decision to defend our community as well.
All right. He got asked about his medical records.
You suffered, as you mentioned a moment ago, a stroke 4 days before the May primary. Last week, you released this note from your doctor saying you can work full duty.
And remember, this is with the
public
captioning.
Office, but you have not released your detailed medical records surrounding your stroke. Mr. Fetterman, will you pledge tonight to release those records in the interest of transparency? You have 60 seconds.
No. To me, for transparency is about showing up. I'm here today to have a debate. I have speeches in front of 3,000 people in Montgomery County, all across Pennsylvania, big crowds. I believe if my doctor believes that I'm fit to serve, and that's what I believe is appropriate. And now with 2 weeks before the election, I have run a campaign and I've been very transparent about being very open about the fact we're going to use captioning. And I believe that, again, my doctors, the real doctors that I believe in, they all believe that I'm ready to be served.
Follow up. I didn't hear you say you would release your full medical records. Why not? You have 30 seconds.
No. Again, my doctor all believes that I'm fit to be serving, and that's what I believe is where I'm standing.
Okay.
All right. Just to also let you know, by the way, I said I would give you an absolutely outrageous example. So when it comes to the muckraking in American politics, it's like nothing else. Yet incredibly, somehow, there's never a leak. There's no leak for these medical records of these like clearly impaired, candidates. We can't get Biden to take a fucking cognitive test because we know his fucking brains are applesauce. If there's anyone left in the world, I mean, this is, by the way, if you ever need to sift through who's a grifter, who's an idiot, who you can just immediately discount their opinions, ask them if Joe Biden is as mentally impaired as Donald Trump. And if they say Trump was easily the same or worse, actually, just go to bed. Joe Biden clearly has dementia, clearly has something wrong with his brain, and yet we can't get him to take a cognitive test, and even though he shows signs of it all the time. I am going to do a Joe Mencha compilation at some point, probably as part of the Enemy of the People, because it's an outrage. It's an outrage that someone so clearly fucked up can just keep being fucked up. And, I remember when people said Reagan used to forget a few things, and then it literally did turn out he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He probably had Alzheimer's while he was in the White House. And people used to go, oh my God, he's got his finger on the red button. It's Reagan's got his finger on the red button. He's going to kill us all. What if he forgets what the red button does? Spoiler, there is no actual red button that you press. It's not a video game. But that's what people said at the time. Joe Biden in office, talking to fucking Force ghosts, calling out to fucking senators that are dead, and he's done tweets saying, miss you, love you, sorry you're dead. And he's forgotten 3 months later. This is a disgrace. Like, it's an actual fucking disgrace. And he's saying he's going to run again. Anyway, this is the worst example I can think of any kind of like intelligence that got leaked. We can't get Fetterman's records. But there was a GOP candidate who was in the Air Force called Jennifer Ruth Green, and her confidential military records got leaked, and they literally used the fact she had been a victim of a sexual assault in the military, in public, to somehow try and discredit her. Again, American politics is like nothing you can really imagine. It's so gross. And yeah, and this is just, the Air Force takes responsibility for it. Based on the preliminary findings of an investigation, it appears information was released to a third party by a junior individual who didn't follow proper procedures and obtain required consent, said Ann Stefanek, Chief of Media Operations for the Air Force, in a statement to The Hill. The Department of the Air Force takes its responsibility to safeguard private information seriously seriously, and the matter remains under investigation. So remember, you don't get to know about whether Fetterman or not is fully fucking stroked out, but I can know if some GOP candidate has had this horrible, horrible thing happen in her life. Whatever. Back to the horror of the Fetterman debate. Fetterman has flip-flopped on fracking. Flip-flopping is where you go one way and then you go another, like a fish out of water, and you're flip-flopping. Because fracking's a big deal in Pennsylvania. Fracking is going to create jobs, but the problem is the Democrats are the party of environmental friendliness, and fracking is considered bad. It's non-environmentally friendly. It can stir up earthquakes, and fossil fuels are bad and all that other stuff. So he's actually said in the past he's against fracking, but that's bad because Pennsylvania want the jobs, and certainly Trump was going to frack until his heart was content. But when asked about this, how do you think Fetterman handles it?
Just a second, Mr. Oz. I do want to clarify something. You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, I don't support fracking at all. So how do you square the two?
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand, and I do support fracking.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fetterman.
The winner, ladies and gentlemen, by the way. Anyway, it doesn't end there. I think we'll do one more clip, but probably by this point you have got the message about just how horrible this debate was to witness. I sat and watched the whole fucking thing. I was like, oh, this is just one of the worst things I've seen in American politics in recent times. It's just so, like, you have a guy in the form of Dr. Oz, who's a TV host, going up against an impaired stroke victim, and this is the debate. It's like, last clip here.
Exactly, Mr. Fetterman, do you propose doing that to make it more affordable for families?
No, I just making it that much more, it costs too much, and I believe providing the resources to reduce the tuition to allow families to be able to afford it.
All right, well, unsurprisingly, Fetterman got beat up in the, during the debate, but certainly in the aftermath by the Republican sources. There were a lot of people tweeting saying, look at this guy, like, how on earth can you send this individual to serve in Congress? And obviously, post-debate, you can imagine how it went down. I'll again just first of all, rather than blame the candidate, they actually blamed the tech. The DNC said that the Fetterman campaign said that the equipment they used for closed captioning wasn't appropriately set up. This was the statement as put out by News Nation, another new news outlet. I think they hired Cuomo. I think they got old Chrissy Cuomo on there. But anyway, I think that's where he ended up. Both candidates agreed to the technical setup for the closed captioning process weeks ago, which was implemented at the request of the Fetterman campaign. Both candidates were offered the opportunity for 2 full rehearsals with the same equipment used in tonight's debate. Mr. Fetterman chose to only do one. In fact, Nexstar's production team went to extraordinary lengths to ensure the effectiveness of the closed captioning process and to accommodate several last-minute requests of the Fetterman campaign. The closed captioning process functioned as expected during rehearsal, and again during tonight's debate. We regret that Mr. Fetterman and his campaign feel otherwise. That was obviously from the people that made the closed captioning, because they came out and said, it sucked. This is what they said initially to prompt that response. We are thrilled with John's performance. He did remarkably well tonight, especially when you consider he's still recovering from a stroke and was working off of delayed captions filled with errors. John won countless exchanges, counterpunched aggressively, and pushed back on Oz's cruelty and attacks. And obviously, MSNBC, here's what they decided to say. They were like, actually, yeah, it was good. It was actually good. The debate was actually really, really good. Really, really good.
Things you posit in your article is that Fetterman's campaign is hoping to turn his sort of vulnerability into an asset here. Do you think he did so on the debate stage tonight?
I think it's tough to say whether or not it will wind up being an asset with voters, but it was certainly an example of such remarkable transparency, the opposite of what the Oz campaign has sort of asserted, which is that he's somehow hiding something about his health. I mean, showing up for an hour debate, and it was, as he said, starting out, he said he was going to talk about the elephant in the room. You played the clip. He said, I'm going to miss words. And you could tell, I wrote in my story about how in my interview with him, there was a moment where he became frustrated and stressed out, and it made some of his communicative problems worse. And I think that this context, and what you described as the insanely high stakes of this election, this single debate, clearly this was a candidate who was feeling stress, and there was such intense scrutiny, often ableist scrutiny, on how he was going to communicate. And he just did a debate in front of, the nation, an audience of anyone who could listen. And it was so transparent. He did fumble. He did make verbal mistakes. And it was all on view.
Certainly was. Anyway, after the debate, Fetterman went back out, somewhat forlornly, licking his wounds on the campaign trail. Remember, all the polling data was saying he was going to lose. Oz was in the lead now, right? And so here we go. He basically went out on the campaign trail, and instead of talking about policy, instead of, again, reiterating, look, forget the debate. Here's what I'm about. This is why you vote for me. This is why I'm good. This is why Oz is bad. He begged for sympathy. And usually, when there's blood in the water, when a candidate shows any weakness, that usually turns American voters off. So again, staggered to see him as the eventual winner.
Never let me ever forget having a stroke. And I guarantee you there's people, at least one person here wanting to film this and to get more words that I miss. It's quite an inspiring campaign to run on that kind of idea. And let me ask you, what kind of doctor that has somebody that was sick wants to stay sick? And everywhere all across Pennsylvania I ask this one question true. It's a very serious question. How many one of you, perhaps any one of you, have had your own personal major health challenge? Anyone? Yeah. Please, and please keep your hands up. Okay, what about maybe your parents? Okay, what about perhaps a grandparent? And God forbid, even a child. There's a lot more of us to be rooting against, like Dr. Oz. And I hope that when you had those challenges among your loved ones, I hope you didn't have a doctor in your life making fun of it or ridiculing that. But unfortunately, I do. But if we don't do what we need to do, we're all going to have him for the next 6 years on that.
Simply awful, which isn't, of course, to excuse anything Dr. Oz had said. I will remind you that some of the things the Dr. Oz campaign said was pretty vile. Dr. Oz did mock his stroke. He said at one point that if he, back over Crudité Gate, if he'd eaten more vegetables and was less fat, he wouldn't have had the stroke to begin with. Then, if you go and look at Vice, very cleverly followed up, just to show you as well, and this is an actual accurate claim. Dr. Oz once claimed being fat means you have a small brain. It's not like this guy should have a medical license or is in any way a good candidate. But by virtue of him not being the one who's had the horrific stroke that seems to be impeding his judgment and his cognitive processes, probably should be winning by default, sadly. I don't know. Anyway, I'll leave you with this. They also did this horrific, cringeworthy political commercial. I don't know what they were thinking with it. This was the Fetterman ad. Basically, they were trying to echo the Mean Gene famous Coca-Cola commercial. I don't know, but just watch it.
Mr. Fetterman, Mr. Fetterman,
Yeah,
you need any help?
I'm running for the U.S.
Yeah, Mean
Senate,
Joe
kid.
Green. Not
I need
Mean
all the
Gene.
help
He
I
was
can
the
get.
wrestling
You're
commentator.
running for Senate?
Sure.
Where's your suit and your flag pin and your hair?
Oh, hey, kid.
I just want you to know I'd vote for you.
Hey, thanks, kid.
You want a drink?
Nah, no.
Really, you can have it.
Okay. Thanks.
See you around.
Hey, kid. Catch.
Wow, thanks, Mayor John.
And of course, as I said, he went on to be the winner, which sort of shows a lot of things, really. I think one of the reasons why he was able to get over the line probably was that with the early mail-in ballot system that's in place, you can probably run a shitty campaign and still get there. It actually doesn't really matter how bad the campaign is. It's not going to move the dial as much as you think, because people are going to go down to party affiliation, get the votes in quickly, and essentially you can be as bad as that. Ultimately, the debate, which a lot of people were still, the pollsters still haven't started to come to terms with what the mail-in ballot system really means for these elections and everything else. So, listen, these midterms, the Fetterman campaign was the only one that surprised me, in all honesty. Everything else pretty much went the way I expected. I could have seen Bobbitt going out, but she didn't. Just, an awful, awful state of affairs for American politics. This is the ugly, grinning face of the system that's in place, where we will just push a man who's clearly unhealthy, perhaps in multiple ways, to over the line because we want to ensure that we have power, and then high-fiving about it when it goes right. And that guy is now a representative, I believe, for 6 years. America, folks, it's quite a thing.